What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Firing Yourself. As always, I am your host, Zach Cronin, and today we're going to be talking about the Jimmy Butler situation once again because this whole incident, these multiple instances of him going or him beefing with Pat Riley, it's gone on for way too long. It's gotten way out of hand. Jimmy Butler was just suspended for the third time by the Miami Heat organization for effectively, once again, conduct that they deem detrimental to the team. Originally, he was suspended 7 games. His second suspension after missing a team flight was 2 games. This suspension is indefinite. This comes after months of back and forth with Jimmy Butler. Well, it stretches all the way back to last summer when Jimmy Butler wanted an extension with the Miami Heat. They didn't want to do that. He has a player option for next season, which he's going to opt out of after this summer, and he wanted to stay in Miami for the foreseeable future. Pat Riley did not want to do that. However, Pat Riley also said that they were not open to trading Jimmy Butler, which is very odd if you're not going to re-sign this guy, but then also just want to let him walk in free agency. Whatever. Stuff like this happens all the time. Contract disputes are nothing new in sports. Where it got really wacky was after Jimmy Butler made his trade request known that he originally gave a list of 4 teams. It was Dallas, Phoenix, Golden State, and I can't remember the fourth team. He gives Miami his list of preferred trade destinations, and they eventually come out and say that both sides are working towards a deal, this, that, whatever. It escalates because of the suspensions, because of probably some bickering going on behind closed doors. Jimmy Butler then comes out and says that he's open to going anywhere except Memphis, which is really odd how Memphis is the one exclusion. But now, after this third suspension, we're 2 weeks away from the trade deadline, and I would not be surprised if Jimmy Butler doesn't get traded. In my first video, I said that I thought he was going to be moved to one of his preferred destinations, but I don't know if Miami is going to do that because they seem quite stubborn in this whole situation. I understand that you have an all-star caliber player in Jimmy Butler. His production is down a little bit this season. He's averaging only 17 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. He's also only playing 30 minutes per game, which is his lowest since his second season in the NBA. Additionally, the team themselves is not looking too hot. They're only 1 game above 500. They are sixth in the Eastern Conference, but it's pretty obvious that this team is no longer one of the elite teams in the conference. And I think part of that, in conjunction with obviously the lack of an extension, is why Jimmy Butler wants to move on from this team. I want to just come out and say that I side with Jimmy Butler in this scenario. I understand that he's not being the best team player right now. I understand that he is behaving unprofessionally by, being like sassy or whatever. But even then, after the trade request came out, Jimmy Butler made it known that although he doesn't want to be here, he will continue to be engaged in activities with the team, whether that be playing in games, whether that be practices. So he was showing a commitment to at least like preserving his reputation. Although I don't think his reputation is at stake here, especially not in my estimation. But that's not good enough for Miami for some reason. What really bothers me about this situation is Jimmy Butler took the Miami Heat to the finals twice. Over the course of these 2 trips to the finals over the last 4 or 5 years, every other contending team in the Eastern Conference has gotten better. They have made moves that, at least on paper and in theory, would lead to them winning another title. The Boston Celtics acquiring Derek White, Kristaps Porzingis. You had the Philadelphia 76ers who traded for, or who acquired Paul George, even though that hasn't panned out on paper, that is a step towards contention. The Knicks making a trade for Karl Anthony Towns. All of these teams, and also you have the Milwaukee Bucks who traded for Damian Lillard. You have the Orlando Magic who may not be making, large moves, but they brought in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and he was only supposed to strengthen their young core. All of the rest of the teams in the Eastern Conference are getting better. And the Miami Heat, Pat Riley, still expects Jimmy Butler to take this team to the finals in a playoff stretch that would include them going up against some combination of Boston, New York, Milwaukee, Orlando. It's unfeasible. You're asking, as the front office, Jimmy Butler, to do more than he's ever done. And you're not willing to go out into free agency and make a big time move. The biggest acquisition they've had over the last couple of years is Terry Rozier. And no disrespect to Terry Rozier, but he's not altering this franchise's trajectory. In 41 games this season, this dude is averaging 12 points and shooting 40% from the field. Jimmy Butler has not received the same level of help from his front office that he needs. This is a guy who we know when he's on the court, he plays with a tremendous amount of effort. Maybe not in the regular season, but definitely in the playoffs. When there is a championship on the line, Jimmy Butler steps up and turns into a top 10, top 8 player in the NBA. And it's almost like the Heat are taking that for granted because they're looking at this roster and they're like, no, Bam and Tyler Hero are good enough. And while I agree that those two guys are talented enough, the rest of the team is lacking. They don't have the depth to contend with the other elite teams in the Eastern Conference. They don't have the depth to contend, or they don't have the depth to compete with the Celtics, who on any given night can go 8, 9, 10 people deep. We'll even extrapolate it out. They don't have the depth, even if they did manage to go to the finals and upset all of these teams. Do you think they can go up against the Oklahoma City Thunder? That they have the depth to contend with that team? They don't have the depth to contend with Cleveland. I forgot to mention Cleveland in this scenario. I can't believe that. That's something, that's an aspect that I don't believe is talked about enough. It's finger pointing at Jimmy Butler for leaving money on the table, at least like what Charles Barkley said. There's folks online talking about how Jimmy Butler is his own worst enemy in this situation. Like, just show up and play. This is not the same as someone just holding out for a new contract. This is a guy who's been with this organization for how many years now? 5 or 6 years? He's been with this organization for 6 seasons. This is the longest he's spent with a team outside of Chicago, the team that drafted him. He's put so much in for this franchise, and the franchise has not reciprocated by giving him back a championship level team. Even the years that they went to the finals, they were not a championship level team, at least on paper. I mean, they were to a certain degree. Defensively, they've been an elite defense for the last couple of years, and you can get to the finals on defense, but no one ever looked at Miami and considered them to be among the elite teams in the Eastern Conference. Maybe I'm just looking at their last handful of seasons. Won 46 games last year, 44 the year before that, 53 the year before that, 40, 44. This is a slightly above average team at best. This is a middle of the pack playoff team. This is like Miami was a comfortable 4, 5, 6 seed for all of Jimmy Butler's tenure, and he managed to take them to the finals twice, where they ultimately lost against better competition. But still, we saw similar things happen in LeBron's first stint in Cleveland. You have a player who is so great a player who helps your team routinely defy the odds, and you take that for granted because they look like Superman, and you don't think that they need help when very clearly they do. And if it wasn't obvious then, it's obvious now. Miami has fallen behind in the Eastern Conference arms race. There's no other way to put it. Pat Riley slept through free agency last summer, and then he has the nerve to get mad at Jimmy Butler for being a little sassy because he wanted a contract extension that the Heat didn't want to give him. And then they didn't want to trade him. What the fuck is the point of that? That doesn't make any sense. As a GM, if you know that you have this elite talent, right? You have Jimmy Butler, who's a perennial all-star, and you're not going to extend him, why are you not fielding calls for him? Your team is not good enough to contend this year. Trade Jimmy Butler. Look towards the future. Maybe you'll have better luck with Hero and Bam, but get something for Jimmy Butler. Now, Miami thinks they have leverage in this situation. I don't think they do. I don't think they do. And it's not because Jimmy Butler is a disgruntled star. If a team were to trade for Jimmy Butler, he would no longer be disgruntled. There's no reason I don't want to say that. Teams will obviously be interested in Jimmy Butler, but the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking. Miami has to make a move. And teams are going to try to capitalize on that. They're going to try to take advantage of the desperation of Miami because, again, everyone knows Jimmy Butler is going to opt out after this season. The Heat are going to lose arguably their best player and not get anything for him. And then they're going to be stuck with a middle-of-the-pack draft pick. And they're not going to have any additional young assets to cultivate. The Heat, everyone likes to talk about Pat Riley as being a great executive. He's undeniably one of the most influential people that the NBA has ever seen, especially when it comes to coaching and to working in the front office. But this is not reflective of the type of executive we know him to be. You can't always be a mafia boss. You can't always strong arm people. Right? Again, this tracks back to if a situation like this happened in Jimmy Butler's first or second season, I think I would be more sympathetic towards the organization, right? Sometimes players get antsy if they don't win right away. I mean, organizations get antsy too. I don't know what the fuck I'm saying. But sometimes, like, these mixed emotions make a little bit more sense when it's early on in your tenure and you're a little bit more lenient with the entire situation. I don't want to understate the fact that Jimmy Butler's been with this franchise for half a decade. He's done a tremendous amount for them. The most productive player for Miami since who? Dwayne Wade, I would say. Like, this is some of the best stretch of basketball they've had since the LeBron and D Wade duo. And it was because of Jimmy Butler. But the front office didn't treat it like that. They treated it as if this just happened in a vacuum. Like, they don't understand why Jimmy Butler could be so frustrated with the situation. It's negligent. This Heat culture is supposed to be more than this, right? The organization is supposed to be tapped into the fucking mainframe of all of their players. They're supposed to know everything about their player, how they're feeling, what their fucking farts smell like. But they can't grasp why the situation would reach this point. I don't know how much this is taking a toll on the rest of the team. Eric Spoelstra talked about how this is basically what it's like being an NBA player. You know, you sign up for this, you work your whole life to get to this point. You have to deal with a little bit of this is drama. This is what it is. You have to deal with a little bit of drama every so on. And I think part of just being an athlete is dealing with it in the best way you can, and that's going onto the court and playing to the best of your abilities. I'm not so sure how much this hampers everything. If anything, this is more of a detriment combined with how inconsistent Miami's been all year. It kind of just feels like a washed season for them. But understand this: if Miami does not trade Jimmy Butler and he walks this summer, things will deteriorate much more rapidly for this organization because Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo will also begin to speculate if this organization will do the same for them. It's not about how you operate the organization in one season. That extrapolates long term. If you're an organization that has a history of making poor decisions, like the Sacramento Kings for the majority of this millennium, it takes so much time to undo that reputation. But it's a reputation earned because every decision compounds. The first instance of suspending Jimmy Butler, you got a little bit of leeway, I guess, right? I was still not thrilled with that situation. Like, it wasn't worth a 7-game suspension for him, again, being a little sassy. But now it's the second suspension, it's the third suspension. And if you're working for another organization and you recognize that this is, again, because of everything that happened last year, like, you begin to question if Miami is beginning to lose, like, their identity. So I hope that Jimmy Butler gets free. There is another aspect of this conversation where people are like, Jimmy Butler is being greedy because he knows he's washed and he's not going to get another contract. I don't think he gives a fuck about the contract, right? The money is nice. Don't get it wrong. The money is nice. But when you're Jimmy Butler and you're 35 years old and you're 0-2 in the finals, you want to win a fucking championship. Every player wants to win a title. This guy has made $263 million in his career. I don't think he's worried about getting another max contract. I think he will try because obviously his agent has to negotiate that for him. But the ring, in my estimation, like if I could play armchair psychologist for a second, he wants to win that ring that has eluded him twice. It's not about him playing for another contract, another max contract. It's about him playing for another contract on a championship team. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close this video out. Thank you guys so very much for coming to hang out with me today. As always, everything I'm associated with is down in the description box below: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Drop a comment as well. It really helps out with the algorithm. If you do any of those three things, you will become my new favorite person. And with that, I will see you in the next one.